get this.
Great day, everybody. This is Gray Transforms. I am Travis Gray. Today, we are transforming with yet another special guest. She is a ceremonial guide and a soul mentor. She is a teacher and a thought leader. Today, we are transforming with Samantha Sweetwater. I have resonated so strongly with the ways that Samantha has articulated and shaped her ideas. We met for the first time at the Envision Music Festival. I had participated, was a part of, in the audience of a workshop, a conversation that she was having with people at Envision Festival. And when I say together, we are moving humanity forward, you hear me say that often. Together, we are moving humanity forward. This is the tribe I am speaking about. Samantha, how are you?
I'm great. It's so sweet to be here with you, Travis. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you as well. And we had a previous conversation to this. We had booked a time just to reconnect after Envision Festival. It had been a month or two, so we reconnected, and the conversation is so organic, and so I like I just said in the introduction, that I resonate so strongly with the way that you articulate and shape your ideas. It feels very much aligned with how I've thought about things of, duality and non-duality, and how these things are weaved together for a better humanity, a moving humanity forward. And I love all of the things that I was seeing on your website and the things that you have spoken to me about with what you aim to do, and the kinds of spaces that you're always creating. So how did you get into this work? How did this story of Samantha Sweetwater begin?
The story of Samantha Sweetwater. Oh, well, in a lot of ways, my story begins with locking myself in a wrestling room at my high school and starting to make dances in great volume, and choreographed dances with grabbing kids about transpersonal states, about the big questions like how do we experience meaning? What does it mean to come home? What is belonging? What is patriotism and citizenship? Why is there war? Why is there war was actually the first dance I choreographed was a 12-minute piece with Robert Frost's Fire and Ice. Some say the world will end in fire, some in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if I've seen enough of hate, I hold that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice.
Yes. Yes.
Kind of an ultimate. It's very ultimate relative to the moment we're in. It's a good one to repeat. So like my life I've had multiple careers that have all been an expression of the impulse of what does it mean to come home? What does it mean to be awake or to remember, which I think are two different things, technically speaking. And what does it mean to be, fully at home, kind of Ram Dass style, in terms of we're all walking each other home? And how is home something that is only possible because we share it? As Desmond Tutu said, we can only be human together. And we can only be home in a world that is homeful, that is worth being home in. And those insights, which were fundamental to my teenage creative and in a way that impulse to lock myself in this wrestling room was a relief from my own mind. I was kind of a child prodigy who I did not find it interesting to play the dominant game. Like from a very early age, I had a very strong insight that the win-lose game dynamics of our current civilizational construct were and are pathological, made no sense to me. And I needed to find a different way, both to make sense of my own insights and emotions, and to kind of have a safe space to nurture an innate knowing, that is, like, as Charles Eisenstein, our dear friend, says, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, that I really knew. And I was very curious about how to draw forth and create spaces where we could experience self-integrity and relational integrity together. So a career as a choreographer and community designer, organizer, a career as a yoga teacher and teacher trainer, which I actually found very unsatisfying because it's really not a pedagogy of liberation in terms of our one just teaching where you're telling people what to do is not a pedagogy of liberation. I really view liberation as something that's self-generated and also shared. And a career as a permaculture community developer, and a career as a transformational dance creator. I created a form called Dancing Freedom, took that all over the world and trained hundreds of facilitators in it, still going. I don't run it anymore. And now I work as an executive coach / soul mentor and as a ceremonial guide. And there's a whole other story there, but that's how I've gotten to where I am.
Wow. So you were locked in that wrestling room. I remember I was trying to get in there. In high school, I grew up wrestling. So that's really awesome. You're locked in the wrestling room. What a beautiful, what beautiful poetry to have created your dance, your created your space, to have treated that space so beautifully through your dance, through creating this dance in the wrestling room. That's really great. So you had just mentioned the coming back into self, and I guess the thought that came up for me right now is the ideas. Some of these ideas you had spoken about a little bit at the Envision Festival of this. To me, it's like there's a lot of relationship that is under defined and under spoken about with the individual, the microcosm and the macrocosm, this individual, what is going on internally for us is a lot of what is being reflected outside of us, and vice versa. And so do you see your work in dance as sort of like this, like moving some of those things? What was the transformational aspect of the dances that you're creating?
A great question. And there were two arcs with the dance. One was the arc of being a community collaborator and choreographer, and one was the arc of constructing Dancing Freedom. But I would say in both instances, I've been fascinated about the intersection between individual experience, personal subjective experience, and shared intersubjective experience that builds a sense of shared meaning, shared belonging, communitas, meaningfully in a place where there is space for and a green lighting of each person's individual experience and interpretation, and also a deep communal sense of shared, like whether we all agree about the experience, we shared that experience. You can't not be in a room where people are sighing or crying or laughing in relationship to the same thing and start to feel like you belong. You also can't be in a room where, so that in terms of my work as a choreographer, what I was really working to create, I could say this in hindsight, was communitas. And part of the contemplation on that was very, very rich for me was that as an artist, or as a writer, and this is such a primal grappling, is one cannot be in charge of the other person's experience. you can only create the context within which that can be a rich experience that also is shaped by, skillful, multi-layered co-orchestration of whatever that is, whether it's the music, the physical environment, and everything going on stage, the words, the absence of words, all of those things. As a facilitator, when are creating dance or ceremony, there's more of a container, which there's not a stage, there's no proscenium breaking, and everyone's in the space together. And so in that context, you're creating a context where everyone is having their own experiences and experiencing that together, which is, for me, I never really wanted to facilitate meditation because it's too uniform. And not that it's too uniform as part of a spectrum of practice. I'm a meditator and I also facilitate meditation now, but I was more interested in creating rich chaos that generates our ability to feel community and unity and diversity. And again, you can't be in a space that is safe, that is fairly safe, where people are having all kinds of different richly human experiences and not be moved by those experiences, both to feel your own humanity more deeply and to feel others more deeply. And that kind of nexus of insight has been really fundamental to my work over the course of my life.
Let me ask you a question about this. So when you facilitate these spaces, these dance spaces, this is not a choreographed space, because that's like the hierarchical pedagogy that you were speaking about before, like the lecturing, telling someone how to move in this space, how to be who they are. So this is it's not a choreographed space, but it is a collaborative co-creation, participating in dance. Is that?
That's right. Yeah. Dancing Freedom is and was, you could say, a very basic collective ceremonial process where we all agree to come together, we all stand in circle, create a collective intention, anchor in an individual prayer or intention, and then go into a shared experience together, which is a movement arc that in Dancing Freedom is elemental. It's elemental, anchored in the Vedic frame of the elements, which is a progression of densities, different than the Platonic, that also, it turns out, dovetails exquisitely with developmental movement. So underlying the facilitative technology of Dancing Freedom, which is, as a facilitator, you offer fairly gently and sparingly, is a very deep terreau of what it really is to become embodied, and how that relates to transformational processes, both the sublimation of and the reclamation and building of various aspects of the self. So in earth, you can compost or bury or slowly oxidize, or you can also build structure and create foundation, as an example. So Dancing Freedom was oriented towards creating a communal experience. You go through the whole arc, and then you harvest that arc, each person having their own unique experience. And there's multiple processes to harvest that, both individually and then in small groups and then in larger groups. And that being a sequence of practice that supports personal process that is always contextualized in terms of community and shared process. Not always shared process, but shared. This is an interesting distinction between a shared process and in a process where we share individually to build a space where everyone has voice and everyone has expression. I'm really passionate about that. And that then is mirrored in the way I facilitate ceremony. The church I run is called One Life Circle. Welcome back to the circle of life to which we all belong, which you never left, but which our kind of top of the pyramid human narrative has distanced us from. And so we're coming back into that. And similarly, we're working with ceremonial processes with psychedelics. It's an opportunity to have sovereignty in each person's practice and also have collectivity that it nurtures the relational dimension of who and what we are. It's kind of like constant re-mentoring into the fact of our shared humanity, the fact of our need to co-regulate with and actually learn from, imprint on others. We have vast science about this now, but there's still sometimes a disconnect between spiritual discourse, which is it's all inside of you, and what we actually know about the nature of our psychological processes and development, which is totally relational. It's not untrue that one can contact the universe inside and that interior processes are extremely important. But I actually think to privilege one above the other is really incorrect. That there's and that there's a way in which in so many ways, our collective narrative is dualistic and creates a schism that I think we very much need to learn to think and speak in these ands and in these synthesis spaces that are wise about the interior and the exterior, the personal subjective, the shared objective, and the shared intersubjective that we are embedded inside of. And it's actually it's a non-trivial conversation right now, as AI blooms and we are in such a rich and, I want to say, binding, modeling of consciousness to try to do the next stage of our technological processes correctly relative to our well-being. And we miss the boat when we say that reality isn't real. That's fundamentally nihilistic in terms of a layered, holonic, intersubjective process that's a living process that we're embedded inside of. It lacks any kind of love or respect for that majesty.
Yeah, there's something fundamentally problematic about the setting one aspect of the dual nature of the cosmos that we live in above others. So the self above the other, or the self above the collective somehow. There's so many directions we can go here, and I really resonate with that. And I found myself I wanted to say, oh, absolutely, but that's so funny to say absolutely, because it is the yes and. I'm really appreciative of this concept of negative capability, that the two opposing ideas can simultaneously coexist. And it is very tricky language. It can be, especially initially getting into this sort of dialogue, this sort of conversation. Initially, it can be very difficult for people to stick with the ands, the yes ands, and I think improvisational work, the yes and it makes it continue, and there's not a no, there's not a language that stops the flow of the conversation, and there is not any language or concept that is going to be stopping the flow of the universe as it continues to cycle and revolve and expand and all of these things. And I really love the aspects of being informed by the ways that we weave together the symbolism. It's really interesting. You use this concept, EnLifenment. And I think this is really cool. I want to ask you more about this. There is some really great research, legitimate scholarly research on the concept of enlightenment. I even have I have a book over here that is an anthology, an older anthology, maybe the 80s, that is, or the 70s, maybe 70s, 80s. That is called "What is Enlightenment?" And so it's an anthology, different chapters, different scholars speaking on it. I really love Alan Watts's chapter on there. This is it. It's just like
very Alan Watts.
just right in the title. Alan Watts is great. And there are all of these ideas around what is enlightenment, but the even for Alan Watts, that this is it, that is the integration of both things, not a hierarchical thing. There's a lot of criticism of Ken Wilber's work where the hierarchical thing is an issue, and that like the hierarchical path to the experience of things. He does have still the four quadrants model that is an integration of sorts, but there is still even within that there seems to be a beneficial quadrant to be in. There's some more strengths than weaknesses, and others more weaknesses than strengths, and all of this very fascinating. There is a scholar that we spoke about in our first conversation, Dr. Jeffrey Martin. I love his work, and I need to have him on the podcast because I bring up this so much because it's really ingrained in my personal research as a doctoral student right now. My doctoral research is around the nature of agency, and because of that, it's our actions in the world as well. So that's why I bring him up so much. But he runs the Center for Non-Symbolic Consciousness, and so this concept of non-symbolic consciousness is this academic way of looking at what is enlightenment, and I find that to be disinforming in some way, based on some of the same things that you were utilizing in the transformative dance practices. It was utilizing this archetypal symbolism of the elements, of using earth. And there's many ways we can look at earth. Earth can be buried. Earth is dry. Earth is also when it's nutriented, it is moist. It has give, and sometimes it's solid, and it has these ways of informing how we are going to embody the dance practice, the co-creation practice. And then water has that, fire has that, air has that. I did a really great exercise with an Aikido instructor around the elements that was really great some years ago. But the utilizing the symbolism is sort of aligned with like Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning, what is Viktor Frankl? Logos therapy. So the logos, this symbol, the logo, the logos. This is informing how we are co-creating with the meaning of that symbol, and you can look at like all kinds of things like this, and they can really greatly expand. But it's always a yes and conversation to keep the flow going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's many angles we could look at this through. And there's such wonderful research on non-symbolic awareness and on the brain states of enlightenment. And my best friend actually did a lot of the data work underneath Jeffrey Martin's research, and her framework that she's emerged with after years of integrating her research is much less hierarchical. And I don't think it's arbitrary that a woman has created a less hierarchical model. And she and I have a very interesting dialectic in our dialogue between what it is to cultivate non-symbolic awareness, reside in that, the great mysteries of that are held in thousands of years of practice, by many lineages, but primarily by the Vedic yogic lineages and by the Buddhist lineages. So holding all of that in great humility, and how those lineages and practices are less focused on, if we use the Tibetan language, on the liveliness. So we would go into emptiness in these practices, and the liveliness is everything else. And we could say that that's a dialectic between the masculine and the feminine, which this would, in the yogic, this would be Shiva, and the liveliness is Shakti. And if we sat with the tens and tens of thousands of years of indigenous wisdom, which, it got comfortably relegated under the myth of primitivism, which is a Western, white, anthropologically inaccurate mythos that is still subconsciously playing out in almost all intellectual communities. But if we took also seriously, with respect and curiosity, the level and magnitude of embodied, well-tested knowledge and wisdom about consciousness in those traditions, not just about the earth, which again becomes this hierarchy of, we have transcendence and like this clunky immanent thing of the earth, instead we could hold, this dance between transcendence and immanence, the liveliness, and the one that observes between, the omniscient, which is actually a trinity, and that's important. But if we consider that there's been a vast underrepresentation and under-attending to the feminine dimensions of consciousness, which we could also look at in terms of patriarchy and the witch burnings and the Inquisition and all of that which has been othered and made dark and black and shameful and problematic, that there's unconscious recapitulation of thousands of years of bifurcation, divide, that we are unconsciously replicating in how we're nurturing our narratives about consciousness. That's what EnLifenment is about. EnLifenment is about the synthesis of that, from increasingly for me, a place of, I will be honest, as a woman who has deep memory of very vibrant living karmic memory of witch burnings and of various ways in which I, as a soul, have been impacted by these divides. Done a lot of work around that pain and that rage. But increasingly, I sit in this very humbled and deeply curious place that is fiercely protective of the continuity of life. As a lifelong spiritual practitioner, very humble to what I don't know. I have thousands of hours of yogic training. I've worked with excellent teachers. I'm initiated by Baba Haridas. I've done deep work in Tibetan meditation. Also seen very deep shadows of those practices in terms of spiritual narcissism and the dissociation from our deeper integration and work. I'm initiated as a priestess. I'm initiated by multiple indigenous lineages. And I sit in this deep humility with commitment that I see something that a lot of people aren't paying attention to. And that many are, but don't always have a theoretical framework within which to situate their experience. That says, kind of like, I'm indigenous to this earth. Like, my ancestors live in the past and want the future ancestors. And that's a process of biological continuity in bodies that is holy and sacred. And, I've had that the ancestors sing that song of continuity, and that human beings are here not just to experience non-symbolic awareness, but also to stitch the story and the song and the seeds and the coherence of the planetary project together. and that we actually have a higher purpose and a shared purpose as a species, which many indigenous cosmologies teach us very directly, not just from a primitive place, but from a truly omniscient place. Like the level of skill that was applied for the Mayans to create the Mayan calendar before there were telescopes, that is an accurate, within minutes, attunement to the arc of our galaxy. And then to say that all we're here to do is go into non-symbolic consciousness seems to me a great arrogance and just short-sightedness. So I sit in great humility and curiosity, attending an and that's what EnLifenment is, and it's a dignification of our bodies, of our humanness, of the womb, of nature. And for me, that then implies a dignification of the soul, which is bound to nature, and an attunement to like the uniqueness of each being, right? So we're learning how to hack humanness, how to do relationships, communication, attachment well. We haven't yet really figured out what to do with our power and our hubris, but we need to work that out too. We're getting what we are capable of as consciousness, as mind. And again, the science is pushing that horizon beautifully. Thanks to many teachers, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, many people who've written wonderful work to help people align with non-dual consciousness. And then where we're kind of stunted and don't actually have a very good collective narrative is what for me is a narrative of the soul of each individual expressing a unique mote of the life principle and of God, and the soul that is a song between all other souls, and a stitching of what I call life's loom. Like there's a lens of omniscience where you can look. And Alan Watts actually talks about this, where you can see the event horizon of life, which is a learning through bodies of souls doing life. That's an evolving body of God, or you could say the goddess, right? If we went back to the Shiva Shakti, but it's like, I think of it as the body of God that is a stitching of all of these lifetimes, chirotically moving in different time signatures, stitching this exploding event horizon across time. And so that's about tending the liveliness. And I would just, I know that that's the rest of my life researching that. And that's the conversation, like, because I can't do that alone. Like Tyson Yunkaporta, who wrote Sand Talk, who's an Aboriginal theorist and teacher and real life human being struggling with his situationality. But he and I had a conversation, and he spoke about how if it's accurate, it's going to become lore. It's going to become something that can only happen through collective process. So here we are speaking together, and like, it's like, and increasingly I'm like, let's do this together. Let's put our minds and our hearts and our practice into this, because I see no way that the Enlightenment narrative by itself could actually give us the sufficient context spiritually to tend the continuity of this planetary project in a way that is beautiful. And that's my big game. And it's the image I was born with. So.
Yeah. Yeah, the three things that I'm going to try to remember from so many wonderful things. You're always speaking with such. I hear the humbleness. I hear the deep reverence for all the cultures and all of the things that you mentioned. I hear it in your voice. I hear it in your communication and your message and your and what you're bringing to this conversation. So and that's the first thing is that I hadn't thought about this before, but now I'm thinking about some of these other conversations that I've had on Gray Transforms, and it's really fascinating that hierarchical thing that we're mentioning right now a little bit in spiritual lineages, and like how that can be deep shadow, and how that can be very arrogant. It's like the indigenous thing is not a less than thing. It is a yes and thing. So it is not a we knew more, we know more, and that is why they are the way that they are, and that this is why we are the way that we are. We know what we know, and that is why we are how we are. But they know what they know, and that is why they are the way that they are. And if and that's just fascinating to me that I hadn't thought about that in those ways. There's something inspiring about how you just mentioned that's this deep hierarchical, privileged, patriarchal thing that has been created in the building of our society in condensation and looking down on the indigenous knowledge, wisdom that is. If anybody goes to experience any kind of indigenous culture, you know without a doubt that there is deep wisdom that is not found elsewhere, that is found uniquely there, distinctly there within their culture, within their teaching. And it's beautiful the way that you said that. So in my research, the reason I bring this up so much, and I love what you were saying about it, that the non-symbolic consciousness is that is an experience. Maybe I'm thinking out loud now, that is an experience attuned to what the permaculture or the nature that surrounds us is already in the experience of. And so this experiencing the non-symbolic consciousness is for us, it exists for us to be informed by, in the ways that we continue to maybe in the ways that we are able to have an opening to empathize with the very things that our society unfortunately is destroying, is tearing down, because of maybe a lack of reverence, but that is out of like an ignorance, an unknowing of the experience of the non-symbolic, and I usually I actually use the term transegoic gnosis. So moving beyond a transpersonal knowing, that a knowing, a knowledge, an experiential knowledge that is beyond the persona, the egoic existence, so that you can be informed by, and then still have a spirituality, a spiritual practice that is practical.
Yes, I love the transegoic gnosis. I am writing about self-sublimation. So there's, a very kind of, I work in the psychedelic space, so there's a very strong narrative about self-transcendence, but what's going on there and why, right? And so in that transegoic gnosis, or what I perceive occurs is a sublimation of egoic structure that orients more towards one, definitely opens to empathy, but also orients towards kinship, orients towards membership, belonging, towards the bond. To go back to the Gita where we were talking before this conversation started, where we are bound as a really sacred contract, in a duty to the covenant of life, to the tree next door that we would actually protect rather than allow it to be cut down, because we love the tree and we love the birds who have, I'm looking at the tree outside my window, who I have a daily conversation with and have attended to their births of their babies. that is part of what we are. And that allow that to shape identity structure is to become more human in a way that sublimates I, but is also not the classic non-dual dissolution or resolution of the I, because it's in an intersubjective fabric that's permeable and always co-woven.
And then when that is disallowed based on this is the right way, that gives this avenue for like a spiritual bypass that and maybe even in the psychedelic experience, or rather not the psychedelic experience, but some of the psychedelic culture, just some of the ways in which people can abuse maybe the substances can be also a bypassing of what the of the duties that we have in the world. And that was something that you spoke to with the Bhagavad Gita. So I'm asking something to about tying in that spiritual bypass in the ways that people can be like hierarchical in their methods and their practices and disallow the integration, the interwovenness of participating with other culture and things. We pointed out the Tao Te Ching. You mentioned that this is your favorite version of the Tao Te Ching, so I'm really happy that just happened to be there that way. And then I have some other great books and collection of things. And then we also spoke about the Bhagavad Gita, which I really love the Bhagavad Gita, but they're handing out Bhagavad Gitas on every street corner. You can have like 100 different versions of Bhagavad Gitas all over the place. So what was what did you say about the duty that was?
Yes, well, the Gita says, do your duty. That is freedom. What the Gita is saying there, what Krishna is saying to Arjuna is, and this relates actually to your dissertation topic around choice, because on some level, the Gita is about choicelessness. And it's about aligning with your dharmic place in the fabric of existence and just doing that as a total sublimation of self that is the seat of freedom. It's like, unless you actually allow yourself to be an expression of the ways in which you were bound to existence, you are unfree. That's the only path of liberation. That is the yoga. And the whole book is a dialectic between Krishna and Arjuna, who's stuck on the battlefield, slogging it out, murdering brothers, and very upset about it. And in a spiritual transformation process being facilitated by the God Krishna, that is an invitation to surrender to duty, surrender to the seat that you occupy, and therefore be free. And it's a wonderfully contextual, like one of the teachings of EnLifenment is that all existence is contextual. Self exists because of world. World, of course, is also filled with and made up of all kinds of other subjectivities that exist because you exist, right? And, in this endless interpenetrated sea of relations. And so, that the Gita is inviting, and EnLifenment is inviting, like, sit where you are and become radically attuned. And to be responsive to that is an expression of the way I experience it, is it's the most dignified thing that one can be. You could also say it is freedom. To speak a little bit to just like what the Tao Te Ching is kind of saying is that the Tao as a way of feeling is and that book specifically, the texture of it is that it's almost like to be attuned in a Taoist sort of way is to expand your attunement. You're listening to the 10,000 things, to what you cannot say amongst that. And Taoism isn't oriented towards enlightenment per se. It's oriented towards alignment, right? And I'm not an authority on Taoism, but I have a lot more context in other lineages. But I love that you brought that in as well, because even thinking back, it was one of the first high peaks for me of spiritual, that book in my freshman year in college. The overall teaching of it is to better become a listener, become a permeable space for the Tao to sing through.
Yeah, I will have eventually I will have Rosemary Anderson, who does a feminine translation of the Tao Te Ching. That was her work in 2017, and such beautiful non-dual work, like very much aligned with this conversation, and really beautiful. But my experience, short-lived, just a small amount of experience with the Tao Te Ching, of reading it, not in any formal practice setting, but that it is I like the alignment, the attunement. It is informing the way of being on the way, informing your way of being in alignment with what we were just speaking about with the non-symbolic consciousness, or the trans-egoic gnosis, the 10,000 ways that cannot be. All of these things. It's so awesome. I feel so privileged. So. To be able to have conversations with yourself, Samantha, that we can have such a really beautiful high level conversation about what about this thing that you can't really you can't put defined words fit perfectly around it the way that like a Western society would want it to be. It doesn't fit inside this exact shape and word, so it can only be pointed at, and in the thousands of years of lineage and tradition of pointing at the way of being, and the way of being in relationship to the thing itself, is it's so beautiful to just be a part of this conversation. And then like now, like we can do this in academic ways, in scholarly ways, in ways that are combining traditions, whereas 1,000 years ago it would have been the only initiation, the only way to dance that dance would be in the choreography of that one culture tradition that you were involved in, and you couldn't combine choreography. It couldn't be house music and hip hop music, and it couldn't be all of these different sounds and music, so that you could find your own dance in the mix of all of that. And that's really awesome. And then what you're saying about the duty in the Bhagavad Gita, and you're relating it to my dissertation work, I'm interested in, like, this is the only dance there is, Ram Dass. This is the dance, and the dance is to participate. The dance is to be in action. If you are waiting for something, that you are not participating in it, and if you are only if you're only thinking that your action is the only thing that exists, then you are also not participating in it. You are looking down. You're walking on top of it. You're not kissing the earth with your feet. You're walking on top of it. So Yeah, beautiful ideas. So and this is how people fall into the bypassing. Like if I do this one practice and it gives me the sense of experiencing that thing, then I might fall into, this is the only way that I could get here. That there
Yeah,
are
and
no other ways to get here.
there's it's very attractive to be and safe. It's
Yeah.
very safe to kind of contain yourself into one state of consciousness.
Yeah.
The refuge. And again, I say that with humility because in the higher levels of those states, there is qualities of liberation and omniscience that I don't yet know. And I'm devoting my practice to that at this time. And yeah, it's interesting. I'm in a really vital conversation. Dustin DePerna, who wrote a couple books with Ken Wilber, is my meditation teacher. And I'm in great conversation with another dear old friend, Sean Fite, who's a Buddhist teacher, beautiful Buddhist teacher. And in general, it's stated that when we go into that nihilism or unconscious narcissism, it's an era of practice that has insufficiently nurtured in the Buddhist context compassion. And I think there's more. Like I'm really pretty sure there's more in this masculine, feminine, non-symbolic, and the liveliness dialectic that we get, that I'm interested in tending as a cultural horizon and a horizon for practice. I know that we're coming to the end of the conversation. May I share something that's kind of lit in terms of a practical application? Because we have gone all over the place. But what I offer listeners, because I imagine people who listen to you are both deep thinkers and also deep practitioners.
Yes, they are. Yes, please share.
Is in the path of enlightenment, there's 3 quadrants that we tend, and we tend them in simultaneity, recognizing that, to use the Tibetan Buddhist language, it is often not possible to hold the view of one quadrant from the other quadrant. So there's the quadrant of our humanness. There's the quadrant of our non-self, which is the non-symbolic awareness. I call it, this would be the trinity of true self, is our humanness, our non-self, and our soul, or soul self. And the practices of humanness have everything to do with developing our deep capacity to relate and create, to be people who live with other people, have partners, have children, communicate well, are healthfully attached, and can express our empowerment in meaningful ways as work or creativity in the world. That's humanness. On the soul side, that there's an aspect of tending practices that nurture the most refined center point of our own incarnational story and multiple incarnational story. And those practices are aligned with often embedded in nature, generally embedded in nature. They're discursive, and they are practices that refine our own most subtle and in often very unattached, like a real soul texture is both like, it feels like popping into the deepest home and truth. And then as you live it, and this is my experience, it becomes increasingly like so soft. Because the soul is the quietest whisper of that which makes us unique. And to attend to that is a path of initiation. And then the no self is also a path of initiation, which orients towards I am the same. That which looks out my eyes is the same as that which looks out of your eyes. And I would say my own practice right now is in a weaving of this that's really delicate. And I find that I cannot take the view of both at the same time. But I have so much soul initiation through all the work that I've done there that I'm like, I can't just take the view that that's not real. And I encourage I'm encouraging that depth of practice in that Trinity. Again, in a collective process that we can only discover together.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We can only discover that together. And this is an awesome conversation. Thank you so much that we get to do this together. Isn't it so cool that we get to be in this sort of work? We get to be having these sort of conversations, and then the kind of like the quality of human beings, of individuals that you come across by being involved in this kind of co-creative space and conversation is it just blows my mind every time. I'm always like, oh yeah, these are going to be great people, and then it just so exceeds my expectations, and it is so amazing. Thank you so much, Samantha Sweetwater, for being here. Where can people go to find out more about your work and all the things that you are doing in the future? Where should they connect with you?
Oh, thank you. You can find me at samanthasweetwater.com or on IG at EnLifenment, and on Facebook as Samantha's World, Samantha's Home. And I have a book coming out in the fall called True Human, Reimagining Ourselves at the End of Our World, recognizing that the constructs of separation are starting to crumble and we are needing to find a new way. And yeah, pardon?
In the fall.
In the fall. The actual date is not set yet, but we're aiming for October 1st.
Great.
And I have a great team supporting it. And yeah, I'd love to share that with everyone here. And I'll be launching a couple of programs soon that can provide access for folks who are not local. Haven't launched them yet, but if you join my website, my mailing list, you'll be invited.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Samantha Sweetwater. This is a wonderful conversation. I'm humbled. I am so appreciative. I deeply respect and revere your frequency and the things that you are bringing to the world through this conversation. Thank you so much.
Such a delight. This was like an alchemical conversation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye.
You're thinking, who is this man talking to? I'm talking to you. You are the realest one you know. And if you